Allora, la seduta è ripresa. Processo verbale della seduta di ieri è stato distribuito. Vi sono osservazioni? Prego. No? Ah no, un'abitudine alzare il catch the eye. In questo caso non c'è catch the eye, il processo verbale è dunque approvato. E adesso salutiamo l'Alto rappresentante per la politica estera, signora Mogherini. Il punto all'ordine del giorno reca una sua dichiarazione sulla situazione in Siria e le do la parola. Prego.
Grazie Presidente. Let me start by saying that we discussed this issue, the situation in Syria, and our work to try and put an end to the war on the 19th of January, so less than 2 months ago. Many different things have happened since then. So I would like to thank you for this debate and for the opportunity that this offers to us all to check and double-check the steps taken, the sense of direction, and also the difficulties we still have ahead of us. First of all, let me remind us all again what happened in this 1 month and a half. First of all, we had the London Conference on Syria. I start from this because this was not only a pledging conference where the European Union and the Member States represented 2/3 of the contributions to support Syrians inside Syria and in the neighbouring countries, but this was also a way of showing unity of the international community and solidarity and a sense of hope for the Syrians in their own country. We have pledged €3 billion in support of the refugees and of the internally displaced people inside Syria, and for the humanitarian aid. I will go back to the role of the humanitarian aid in a moment, from a political and also from a security point of view. But we also prepared 2 packages, 2 compacts, as we call them, one for Jordan and one for Lebanon, that are comprising not only financial support, but also some measures that can support these countries in the integration effort of the Syrian refugees in the host communities, giving children education, giving young women and men job opportunities, and also making it sustainable for the communities in Jordan and in Lebanon to sustain this effort in the mid-term period. The second thing that happened since the 19th of January is that the first round of talks among Syrians took place in Geneva. Almost immediately suspended because of clear problems that were coming up in the first talks that Staffan de Mistura was holding at the time, and a subsequent meeting of the International Support Group in Munich, where we met at length for many hours together with John Kerry, Lavrov and all the other foreign ministers that are represented, some 20 countries and the European Union around the and the Arab League around the table, trying to exactly check whether the suspension of the talks in Geneva was due to difficulties that were impossible to overcome, not only locally, internally, nationally, among the Syrians, but also in the bigger regional framework, or if it would have been possible, through the International Support Group, to move forward and revitalise a process in which so much all of us have invested in the last months. And out of this meeting in Munich, we established 2 task forces, one on the modalities of the cessation of hostilities, co-chaired by the US and Russia, being the 2 actors that needed to coordinate the most, especially a military-to-military coordination, to identify in concrete terms the maps, the groupings and the areas for the entry into force of the ceasefire or the cessation of hostilities, and a task force on humanitarian aid, because we identified very clearly the need to have a second round of talks in Geneva that Staffan de Mistura announced now for tomorrow and the coming days, that to make sure that these talks would happen in a completely different or very substantially different atmosphere on the ground rather than the one that we experienced in the previous occasion, meaning to try and reduce the gap between Syrians talking in Geneva of a very difficult political transition and process, and on the ground Syrians dying in besieged areas and cities with no access of humanitarian aid. So we knew that delivering in an effective way humanitarian aid, food, medicines to the Syrians inside Syria would have given credibility, or would have created conditions for a credible process in Geneva, and also would have opened some channels for political discussions among different parties. We then had, you know that, the task force on the cessation of hostilities producing very advanced work, the humanitarian task force as well, I'll come in details in a moment, and the adoption of the UN Security Council Resolution 2268 on cessation of hostilities that started on the 29th of February. Since then, I have to say, not only myself, but also the UN Special Envoy, Staffan de Mistura, and the two co-chairs of the task force, the US and Russia, that the cessation of hostility, the ceasefire, is substantially holding, even if we are seeing several breaches throughout Syria, in different parts of Syria. However, the overall assessment is that the ceasefire is holding and that the situation on the ground for this whole week has been significantly improved compared to all the previous weeks of the conflict. This to say that this is probably the first time in 5 years of conflict that we see in many parts of Syria no major armed intervention, even if, as I said, breaches are happening continuously, but with an intensity and with a magnitude that is definitely of a different scale rather than in the past. And on the humanitarian task force, we have managed in these weeks to deliver aid through 180 trucks to 150,000 Syrians inside Syria in different besieged areas, and we are working, the EU in particular, and together with the UN, I'll come back to that, as I said, working to reach areas further beyond the ones we have managed to reach so far. As I said, Staffan de Mistura has announced the talks to restart from tomorrow onwards. We do not expect this to be an easy process, on the contrary, but it is definitely good, the fact that we managed to somehow recreate, or create rather, the conditions for the talks to be taking place. I met myself Hijab in Paris a few days ago, and we discussed at length not the conditions that anyone puts for going back to Geneva, but how the international community, the regional actors and the participants to the talks managed to create the conditions for the talks to be significant and substantial. Let me say that one strong message that we are passing, all of the European Union together with the rest of the international community, but here I talk for the European Union, united, is to encourage all the parties, starting from the regime obviously, but also the opposition, to not only go to Geneva and take part to the talks, but also to do this with a spirit of engagement and compromise. And obviously we are also working as the European Union to support the opposition in this very difficult task of entering these difficult negotiations. It is the first time after 5 years of war that we have this combination of cessation of hostilities, overall holding, even if with significant breaches, but overall holding, and humanitarian aid delivered in besieged areas. So Indeed, this is not creating a rosy picture from one day to the other or from one week to the other, but there are some steps that are finally in the right direction. One of these is the coordination that I mentioned before, the US and Russia have developed, especially on the military to military level, a close coordination with regard to the establishment first and then the monitoring of the ceasefire and the work to defuse tensions that could endanger this very fragile truce. This is why I believe that those who talk about a new Cold War definitely need a reality check when it comes to this level of coordination and messaging. Now, the role of the European Union. The European Union is part of both the task forces with different roles. On the ceasefire, on the cessation of hostilities task force, we have a presence together with other countries that are part or organizations that are part of the international support group. We have our military experts present there, and we are also working at ways in which we can contribute to monitor the cessation of hostilities together with other friends. On the humanitarian assistance task force, our role is definitely much bigger, relevant one, not simply because we are the ones who are the good ones and not those that get implied into military things, but simply because in Syria, in specific terms, the role of the European Union has not been, this was a political decision, that I think it was right, has not been and is not a military player on the ground in Syria. Some member states are, but nonetheless, the leading role here is for the two main countries that have a military presence, activity, knowledge and control of the military activities that can be then leading to negotiations on the establishment of cessation of hostilities. This doesn't mean, as I said, that we are not part also of this very crucial work with our active presence there. And that, as I said, might increase in the future days. On the humanitarian assistance, there is here a very strong link between the humanitarian aid and the political process that needs to restart. Last time we met, I remember that many of you mentioned the need for a Marshall Plan for Syria. If we consider the numbers we are putting, the money we are putting in this inside Syria, in the neighbouring countries and elsewhere, I can say that the Marshall Plan has already started in a very significant way. The humanitarian task force, in which, as I said, we have a leading role, has already met 4 times and, as I said, has succeeded in delivering 180 trucks of aid to 7 besieged areas, and we reached out to more than 150,000 Syrians in cities like Madaya, Muadamia, Al-Sham, Kaf Batna, Fua, Kafraya, Zabadani and Deir el-Suds. This is not an exhaustive list. On the contrary, we are working on further cities that all over Syria need to be reached and could be reached in terms of priorities in the coming days or weeks. The plan is to deliver assistance to more than 1.7 million Syrians inside Syria during the first quarter of this year, so in the next couple of months. To provide direct help for the humanitarian deliveries and work hand in hand with the UN agencies on the ground, we have reactivated our ECHO office in Damascus. And among international actors, let me say that the European Union is probably the only one that is considered trustworthy by all sides, inside Syria and in the region. We have somehow a privileged access to many of the interlocutors that then have to work on the steps that are needed to allow humanitarian aid inside the difficult to reach areas. Our major role on humanitarian aid gives us also a major political role to play. And we are doing this. We are helping to create windows of trust between different parties in the conflict. Our role is to widely open such windows for meaningful and comprehensive negotiations towards a political transition. We have to take in mind, even with these positive steps that have taken place in the last weeks, that a new escalation might still happen any time, that the regional situation remains very tense. We see every single day news that are extremely worrying, even this morning, and that the proxy war among regional and international powers could still turn into a direct war. This is something we must always keep in mind all through our work, keeping the hope that moves us forward on the diplomatic track, on humanitarian assistance, and also on the work on the cessation of hostilities and the monitoring of the ceasefire, keeping in mind the risk that this could still degenerate and go backwards if we don't show consistency and if you don't encourage enough the players on the ground, the military groups, the political actors, to engage the regime first and foremost, to engage in a meaningful political process. We have had talks, I have had talks directly in these days with all our partners, friends, interlocutors, not friends, inside Syria and outside of Syria in the region, to pass the same message, to engage in the political process, to allow the humanitarian access to improve and to significantly work to have the cessation of hostilities hold and improve day by day. And just yesterday we discussed this with our Turkish partners, and if you look at the communique that was coming out of the Council yesterday night, you will find a reference also to the need to work together, Turkey and the European Union, to improve the humanitarian conditions in more and more areas inside Syria, and this is a common commitment we've discussed with the Turkish yesterday. Everyone must do their best in this moment. We have opened a window, a small one, very small. We have to make sure that it doesn't close and that it opens further on the three levels: humanitarian, ceasefire, military, and the political one. And let me take this opportunity here to thank Staffan de Mistura for an excellent work of coordination that he's doing. Our contacts are daily ones, and the way in which we're working together with the United Nations in all these three aspects is really, I think, an example of our work also in other fields. I think we have seen that diplomacy can work in recent experiences last year. We know that Daesh can be defeated, and that it can be defeated only through a process that puts an end to the war in Syria and guarantees a transition in Damascus. We know that the war inside Syria can be over and forces can merge to fight terrorism, Daesh and al-Nusra in the country. We have today first steps in the right direction, result of a very determined, I would say stubborn work we have done, coordinated with many others, starting from the USA. And after 5 years of war, diplomacy, including European diplomacy, is starting to bring some first results that, as I said, could turn back any single moment if we don't have all the actors pushing in the same direction with the same stubbornness we have shown in the last months. And we need to continue to build on this, to try and have a new Syria, most likely the one that has been destroyed in 5 years of war will not come back with all its beauties, but maybe we can allow the Syrians to build the country again, beyond ethnicity, religion or political creed, to be united, democratic, non-sectarian, not governed by the same men who presided over so many years of civil war, but with an inclusive governance guaranteeing all different Syrians to be part of the same country, with no space in it for Daesh and al-Nusra, which have nothing to do with the history of the country and will have nothing to do with its future if we manage to work well together, as we have done in the last weeks. Thank you.
Bene, grazie alla vicepresidente Mogherini per questa dichiarazione. Adesso sentiamo i gruppi politici. La parola all'onorevole Preda del Partito Popolare per 1 minuto e 30. Prego.
Merci infiniment, Monsieur le Président, Madame la Haute Représentante.